Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. In this video, we will explore the provocative theories of the Italian researcher Simonetta Torresi, who challenges the conventional map of history and reconsiders the very origins of European peoples. Simonetta Torresi is an Italian historical researcher active since 1994. She specializes in the local history of the Italian region of the Marche and in revisionist research concerning the historical geography of Europe. Over the years, she has devoted herself to historical research, frequently presenting her work at conferences and symposia. Her research activities have included publishing in various newspapers and specialized journals, organizing and managing private libraries, appearing as a historical expert on television and radio programs dedicated to historical and artistic topics, and curating historical and cultural events. 2+2, The History of the Peoples of the Marche, or the Origin of Europe, 2016, is Simonetta Torresi's foundational work, presenting a radical reinterpretation of European historical geography. In it, she proposes that the Marche region was the true location of the Merovingian and Carolingian capitals, as well as of the major medieval abbeys traditionally placed in France and Germany. Simonetta Torresi represents a current of alternative or geographically revisionist historical research. She questions the spatial placement of historical events rather than their occurrence. Although not recognized by mainstream academic historiography, her work has cultivated a dedicated audience and has helped draw renewed attention to the historical and archaeological richness of the Marche region. The theory of Simonetta Torresi, when geography betrays history. Simonetta Torresi's theory begins with a methodological premise that is as simple as it is revolutionary. Historical documents should not be denied. Texts are not forgeries, but their modern geographical placement may be profoundly wrong. Documents can be transcribed, copied, transported, and reinterpreted over time. City names can migrate from one place to another. Narratives can be retrospectively harmonized by historians seeking continuity. What cannot be moved, what resists every narrative manipulation, are material traces. Archaeology, frescoes, urban stratifications, walls, and deep cultural traditions rooted in a territory. Hannibal and the Alps. One of the most striking anomalies examined by Torresi concerns one of the most famous events of ancient history: Hannibal's crossing of the Alps with his Carthaginian army, including war elephants, in the autumn of 218 BCE. According to the traditional narrative, Hannibal crossed the Western Alps under extreme climatic conditions, snow, ice, avalanches, losing much of his army and nearly all of his elephants. This is presented as a unique feat in military history, never replicated. And that is precisely the problem. No one has ever replicated Hannibal's feat. Napoleon crossed the Great St. Bernard Pass, but in summer, with prepared roads, dismantled artillery, and organized logistics. No general in history has ever attempted to cross the Alps with elephants, in winter, without roads, and in hostile territory. The elephants are the real breaking point. North African elephants, smaller than Indian ones, suffer enormously from cold, ice, and steep gradients above 2,000 meters. There is no other reliable historical testimony of elephants crossing alpine passes covered in snow. For an event of such magnitude, tens of thousands of men, animals, and supplies, there is virtually no definitive archaeological evidence. No significant camps, no elephant bone deposits, no unequivocal military remains attributable to Hannibal in the Western Alps. But if Hannibal had crossed the Apennines instead of the Alps, everything would change. The Apennines have lower elevations, a less extreme climate, more continuous passes, ancient pastoral routes, and long-standing traditions of transhumance involving large animals. The feat would remain arduous and exceptional, but logistically plausible, not miraculous. Moreover, according to official history, Hannibal destroyed Turin, where a Turinensis church supposedly existed. Yet in modern Turin, there is no significant archaeological evidence of Hannibal's passage, nor any trace of an ancient Turinensis church. In contrast, in the Apennine area of the Marche, we find Pieve Turina, or Pieve Toria, with a documented Turinensis church and a local tradition of naming children Hannibal, a tradition almost extinct today, but alive until a few generations ago. The meaning of the mountains. The very name of the mountains reinforces the doubt. In medieval Latin, Alp did not exclusively mean the modern Alps, but generically referred to a highland, pasture, or mountainous area. In central Italy we find Alp della Luna, an Apennine mountain group between Tuscany, Umbria, and Marche. Alp di Sibilla, today's Mount Sibylla in the Marche Apennines. The Apuan Alps in the northern Apennines. The Alps of Rio di Lonato in the Medina Apennines. If in the Middle Ages the Apennines were called Alps, and if Latin documents speak of Hannibal crossing the Alps, then modern geographical relocation may have shifted the event to the wrong mountains, rendering impossible what was once difficult but feasible. Accepting even as a working hypothesis the semantic and geographical shift of the Alps from the modern Alpine range to the Apennines leads to structural consequences, not marginal ones. It would require reconsidering the entire original map of ancient Europe. In this perspective, Hannibal's feat ceases to be an unrepeatable military miracle and becomes a humanly possible action. Marches, timing, and survival once again align with physical reality. The Apennines, heart of ancient Italy, would thus become the true stage of Europe's foundational events. The De Bello Gallico. The same logic applies to Julius Caesar's campaigns described in De Bello Gallico. The movements of the legions, the distances covered, the marching times, and the rapid succession of battles appear logistically impossible when placed within modern European geography. A paradigmatic case is the war against the Veneti, described as a maritime, naval, port-based people with strong fleets and knowledge of tides. Traditionally, this war is placed in northwestern France, in Brittany. Yet after this epic conflict with Rome, the French Veneti vanish without leaving significant cultural traces, enduring traditions, or convincing toponymic continuity. Meanwhile, along the Adriatic coast, the Veneti are historically attested, culturally continuous, and central to Mediterranean trade. The name Venice never disappears, Venetian culture persists, naval tradition is uninterruptedly documented. From an anthropological and cultural standpoint, it is far more plausible that Caesar fought the Adriatic Veneti rather than an Atlantic people who then evaporates from history. Read through this lens, De Bello Gallico ceases to appear militarily absurd and becomes a coherent chronicle. Distances become traversable, battles plausible, peoples recognizable. Roman expansion. Simonetta Torresi's theory does not deny Roman expansion into northern Europe and North Africa, but repositions it chronologically. Rome would not have conquered northern Europe and North Africa when official history claims, but in later phases, marked by advances and retreats influenced by climatic changes. The late antique and early medieval climatic cooling is a recognized historical fact. Increased humidity, agricultural crises, and depopulation of vast northern areas. This would have pushed Rome back toward the Italian peninsula, leaving in the north weak, fragmented, and discontinuous presences, exactly what archaeology reveals. Rome, a capital without a city. The case of medieval Rome is perhaps the most devastating anomaly of the entire historiographical construction. Official history asks us to believe that Rome remained the center of the papacy throughout the Middle Ages, seat of the greatest political religious power in Europe. Yet at the same time, it describes Rome as a depopulated city, reduced to a few tens of thousands of inhabitants, in ruins, with neighborhoods abandoned, aqueducts collapsed, and monuments quarried for stone. Original medieval constructions in Rome are very few. Medieval frescoes are almost absent. Urban descriptions in medieval sources are vague, symbolic, rarely topographical. When a medieval traveler writes that St. Peter stands at the center of the city, and before it there is a great square with a tall tower, this description does not match modern Rome, where St. Peter's is peripheral, outside the ancient walls. It does, however, perfectly match compact cities of central Italy such as Macerata, where a central church of St. Peter existed, a defined square, remains of a tower, and a coherent medieval urban fabric. The theory of the relocation of Rome. Here Torresi advances her most radical hypothesis. Imperial Rome indeed coincides with modern Rome on the Tiber. But medieval Rome, understood as the real operational seat of papal power, would have moved to central Italy, to the Marche, specifically to Macerata, starting in the 6th century with Pope Gregory the Great. This Rome would have continued to be called Rome according to the medieval principle ubi papa, ibi Roma, where the Pope is, there is Rome. It is not the city that defines the papacy, but the papacy that defines the city. Later, the name and function would have returned to present-day Rome. This explains why medieval Rome appears so ghostly in the sources. Power operated elsewhere, while the name was preserved for symbolic continuity and juridical legitimacy. The mystery of the Parisii. According to traditional historiography, the name Paris derives from the Gallic tribe of the Parisii, said to have inhabited the Isle de la site. Yet after decades of extensive archaeological excavations, no concrete evidence of a Parisii settlement has ever been found on the island. Nor are there traces of the cult of Isis, despite the city's name being linked by some scholars to this Egyptian deity. Torresi proposes a radical rereading. The name Paris derives from Paris, whose real name was Alexander, son of Priam, king of Troy. According to myth, Paris was consecrated to the goddess Isis to save him from death after a prophetic dream foretold he would cause Troy's fall. Paris would literally mean for Isis. In the Marche, between Traia and Rambona, archaeological finds exist, statuettes considered original, concrete traces of Egyptian and Eastern cults. Traia stands on a hill identified by Torresi as the site of Priam's ancient palace. Rambona is interpreted as Ra cum Bona, a syncretism between the Egyptian god Ra and the Roman goddess Bona. The presence of the cult of Isis is archaeologically documented, not merely narrated. Once again, where are the material proofs in Paris? And why are they so abundant in the Marche? Torresi's answer is extraordinary. Medieval Paris was not on the Seine, but on the Potenza River. Modern Macerata represents the true Paris of medieval chronicles. In this scenario, Macerata was not only Paris, but a great city within which Rome existed as a distinct entity, exactly as the Vatican City exists within Rome today. Medieval Rome would thus have been a papal power center embedded within Paris Macerata, a state within a city, a sacred city inside a political one. Medieval frescoes. Another crack in the edifice of official history emerges from an imbalance so evident it becomes embarrassing. Italy contains thousands of medieval fresco cycles, cathedrals, churches, abbeys overflowing with continuous, stratified wall painting. In Northern Europe, France, Germany, England, Belgium, original medieval frescoes are extremely rare, fragmentary, often preserved only in crypts or marginal structures, usually in buildings reconstructed multiple times after providential fires. The official explanation blames the climate, but this justification collapses when observing northern Italy. Cities like Naterno in South Tyrol preserve intact early medieval frescoes from the 7th to 8th centuries in climates as harsh and humid as many French or German regions. The Church of St. Proculus preserves paintings older than almost all Gothic cathedrals of Northern Europe. If the Middle Ages truly unfolded primarily in France and Germany, why are its most abundant and continuous artistic traces found almost exclusively in Italy? A civilization leaves marks where it lives, not where it is said to have lived. Le Goff and the Phantom University. Another example highlighted by Torresi concerns Jacques Le Goff, one of the most influential medievalists of the 20th century. Many of his reconstructions rely on chronicles and travelers' accounts that, upon closer analysis, reveal striking chronological inconsistencies. A paradigmatic case is Daniel of Morley, a 12th century traveler who describes the academic environment of Paris in harsh terms: crude teachers, mute as statues, incapable of dialectical confrontation. Disillusioned, Daniel moves to Toledo, where he finds true masters of the quadrivium and natural philosophy. The problem is not the account itself, but its placement. This decadent university is described before 1257, the official founding date of the University of Paris. A decline is described in an institution that did not yet formally exist. Once again, the text does not lie, the geography does. The Renaissance paradox. This geographical fracture becomes even more glaring when observing the Renaissance. According to traditional narrative, the Italian Renaissance emerged after the European Middle Ages as a subsequent historical phase. But logically, a historical epoch should grow organically from the previous one, not materialize suddenly in a completely different geographic area. If the Middle Ages were in Northern Europe, why does the Renaissance explode only in the South? If Italy was marginal during the Middle Ages, how does it suddenly become the absolute center of European culture? Here continuity breaks. This is not a detail, it is a structural problem of the narrative. The scientific method. The method used by Simonetta Torresi unequivocally shows that the most problematic and important events of European history always occur, officially, in the same places, precisely those with the least material continuity. When these events are relocated to the Marche and central Italy, many inconsistencies dramatically diminish. Distances become traversable, timelines realistic, traditions coherent, and archaeology abundant. If Torresi's theory were true. If Torresi's theory were true, Europe would not be born at the margins of Italy, but within it. The Marche would not be a periphery, but a forgotten epicenter, not a land of passage, but an original crossroads where myths, peoples, languages, and religions formed before being projected elsewhere, rewritten, renamed. In this light, anomalies cease to be exceptions to ignore and become clues. The examples presented here, from the fresco paradox and Hannibal's logistical improbabilities to the geographical enigmas of Rome and Paris, represent only a fraction of the anomalies identified in Simonetta Torresi's work. They are illustrative samples of a much broader and meticulously documented critique. For a complete exploration of her theories, including analysis of original documents, extended case studies, and the full historical argument, readers are directed to her published volumes. The full body of evidence and reasoning is detailed in her books. 2+2. The History of the Peoples of the Marche, or the Origin of Europe, as well as the 4-volume critical study, Alessandro Barbero, is wrong about Charlemagne, and her most recent book, In the Ancient Courts of Ancient Men. With these works, Simonetta Torresi invites a profound reconsideration of where the foundational narrative of European peoples truly unfolded, and inaugurates a new discipline, the geography of history.